Have you ever had a moment in your life when everything changed in an instant? When the lines between right and wrong blur, and you're left wondering how you got there in the first place? Well, this is one of those moments for me. And it all started on a normal Tuesday morning. It was supposed to be just another quiet morning, one of those moments you hardly remember because it's so routine. But in my case, that morning, something happened that would change everything. I had just moved back into my dad's house after finishing university, trying to save up a bit of money before finding a place of my own. My dad, Mike, had remarried while I was away studying. His new wife, Karen, was not at all what I had imagined a stepmother would be. She was warm, funny, and had this kind of energy that lit up a room. At first, I was unsure about how things would go. It's not every day that you have to live with your dad and his new wife, especially after you've been away for so long. But surprisingly, Karen and I got along really well, maybe even better than I got along with my dad sometimes. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that day. It was an ordinary morning, one I had been anticipating for weeks. I had just moved back in with my dad and his new wife, Karen. After finishing my studies, I had returned to the city to start my new life, figuring I'd save up a bit before finding my own place. I knew it would be an adjustment, moving in with my father and his new wife. Especially after all, these years of living apart, but nothing could have prepared me for what was about to happen. Karen was nothing like the stepmother I had imagined. Far from the typical cold and distant figure I had read about in stories, she was warm, vibrant, and always in good spirits. At 62 years old, she still had this lively energy about her that made her the heart of the house. Everyone loved Karen, including me. In fact, I'd gotten along with her better than I had with my dad sometimes. There was something about her that made you feel like everything would be okay. That morning, I was in the bathroom preparing for a job interview. It was for my dream job, a position I had been dreaming about for years. The air was thick with steam as the shower ran, and I stood there nervously, trying to calm my racing heart. I was rehearsing my answers in the mirror, trying to convince myself I was ready for this big moment. This could be the opportunity I'd been waiting for. But then I heard a knock. It was soft but distinct. "Jake?" It was Karen's voice, gentle and comforting as always. "Are you in there?" I called back, trying to sound casual despite the nerves. "Yeah, Karen, just getting ready for my interview?" She paused for a moment, then spoke again. "Sorry to bother you, but I need to grab something from the bathroom. Do you mind?" I didn't think much of it. "No problem, come on in." I was still trying to steady my nerves when the door creaked open. I didn't expect much. Maybe just a quick grab of something off the counter, and then she'd be gone. But Karen didn't leave. Instead, she walked in wearing a soft, light blue robe. Her silver hair was tied back in a neat bun, and her smile was warm, just like always. She reached over to grab something from the shelf, and that's when I noticed something strange. Her robe wasn't quite as tightly fastened as it should have been. It opened slightly, enough for me to catch a glimpse of her shoulder. I immediately looked away, feeling my face flush, but it was too late. The moment had happened. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She turned to face me, her eyes dancing with a hint of mischief. "Oh, I'm fine," she said, holding up a bottle of aspirin. "Just needed this for a headache." I nodded, grateful for the distraction. "Thanks. I'm a little nervous about this interview," I confessed, hoping the conversation would focus elsewhere. Karen flashed that reassuring smile of hers, the kind that always made me feel like I could take on the world. "You'll do great, Jake. Just be yourself. You're amazing, and they'll see that." Her words of encouragement were exactly what I needed. I smiled, reassured, trying to push aside the awkwardness of the moment. As she turned to leave, I didn't expect anything out of the ordinary. But then, it happened. The belt of her robe slipped from her waist. The next few seconds felt like they stretched on forever. The robe fell open entirely, revealing more of her than I had ever seen before. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Karen, my stepmother, was standing in front of me, exposed, vulnerable, and completely unaware of the effect it was having on me. I quickly averted my eyes, feeling my face burn with embarrassment. "Oh my God!" Karen gasped, her face turning crimson. She fumbled with the robe, hastily trying to close it, but the damage was done. "Jake, I am so sorry. I didn't even realize." I felt my heart race as I turned around, giving her space to regain her composure. My thoughts were all over the place, my mind struggling to make sense of what had just happened. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "It was an accident. Don't worry about it." Are you sure? I feel terrible, she stammered, her voice tinged with mortification. I nodded, not entirely sure how to process the situation. It's fine. It was just a mistake. It happens. But despite my words, everything felt different. She hurried out of the room, leaving me alone with a racing mind and a heart that wouldn't stop pounding. My stepmother had just unexpectedly exposed herself to me, and I couldn't stop replaying the image in my head. The rest of the day felt like a blur. My interview loomed, but I couldn't focus on anything except what had just happened. I couldn't stop thinking about Karen, about how beautiful she looked in that moment, how vulnerable she was, and how she had seemed almost human. I had always admired Karen, but this was different. It wasn't just admiration anymore. It was something deeper, something I didn't know how to handle. And yet, there was something about that moment that felt strange. Something in Karen's eyes as she quickly apologized and rushed out of the bathroom. Was it just embarrassment? Or was there something else? I spent the rest of the day trying to avoid her. I didn't want things to be weird between us, but I also didn't know how to face her after what had happened. Every time I saw her, I could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken things hanging between us like a thick fog. That night, I went to bed early, hoping sleep would clear my head. But as I lay there in the dark, I kept replaying that moment over and over. It wasn't just about the accident anymore. It was about what had happened between us, and the feelings that had suddenly surfaced. Feelings I wasn't ready to deal with. In the days that followed the incident, everything seemed off-kilter. I tried to act normal, but every time I saw Karen, I couldn't shake the memory of what had happened. My mind kept drifting back to the image of her standing there in the bathroom, and I realized that I couldn't stop thinking about her. I had never looked at her that way before, and that was what made it so unsettling. Was I feeling something I shouldn't? I couldn't tell anyone about this. There was no way I could go to my friends, or worse, to my dad, and explain what had happened. At first, I tried to bury it, to move on as if nothing had changed. After all, this was just one weird moment, right? But no matter how hard I tried, it was always there, lurking in the back of my mind. Every time I passed Karen in the hall, my heart would skip a beat. Her smile still made me feel safe. But now, every time I saw her, I was reminded of what had happened in that bathroom. The simple things she did, the way she laughed when we talked about mundane things, or the way she offered me tea in the evenings, all felt charged with something unspoken. The tension was palpable. I couldn't help but notice how she started acting differently too. Maybe she was avoiding me, or maybe it was all in my head. I wasn't sure anymore. She would greet me warmly, as she always did, but there was a slight hesitation in her voice, a small change in the way her eyes met mine, almost as if she was trying to figure out how to act around me now, and I was completely lost. The more I tried to avoid her, the more I found myself drawn to her. There was something irresistible about her energy, her calm demeanor, her warmth, but now there was something else that clouded my mind. One evening, a week after the incident, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table. It was late, and I hadn't meant to stay up this late, but I had been putting off work for hours. My laptop sat in front of me, open to a blank page. I had been staring at it for what felt like an eternity. I needed to get my mind off things, but every time I tried to focus on something, Karen's image kept coming back. And in that moment, I realized I was avoiding my own feelings. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, letting out a deep sigh. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Karen walking toward the kitchen. She had just finished her nightly walk, and her cheeks were slightly flushed from the crisp evening air. She always seemed to glow after those walks, like she was radiating this gentle energy that was hard to ignore. "Late night?" she asked, her voice soft but warm, as always. I nodded, trying to act nonchalant. "Yeah, just trying to wrap up a few things. I keep getting distracted." She smiled and poured herself a glass of water, then turned her gaze back toward me. "I get that. Sometimes the mind just wanders." I chuckled, trying to shake off the unease. "You could say that? My mind has been all over the place lately." I wasn't sure why I was admitting this to her, but it felt strangely comforting. I had always found solace in her presence. Karen set the glass down and sat across from me at the table, her eyes locking with mine. "Want to talk about it?" she asked. There was a knowing look in her eyes, one that made me feel like she could see right through me. I hesitated. I wanted to talk about it, to get it off my chest, but I didn't know how to even begin explaining what had been going through my head. I didn't want to admit what I was feeling. Was it guilt? Confusion? Something deeper? I wasn't sure, but I didn't think I could handle discussing it with her. Not when the feelings were so raw and new. Honestly, it's nothing, I said, forcing a smile. Just work stuff, you know? Nothing that's worth talking about. Karen didn't push further, but I could see that she wasn't convinced. There was a flicker of concern in her eyes before she nodded and smiled. Well, if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm always here. I know what it's like to carry things around, to feel like you have to hold it all in. Her words hit me harder than I expected. In that moment, I realized that I had been bottling up my emotions, not just about what happened with her, but about everything. I had been keeping up a front, pretending like everything was fine when, deep down, I knew it wasn't. The pressure was building, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep it inside. The next few days felt like a blur. I spent hours staring at the same documents at work, my mind constantly drifting back to Karen. Every time she smiled, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of something. That felt like longing. I told myself it was just a passing moment, a weird phase I would get over. But when I saw her in the kitchen making her famous lemon cake for my dad's upcoming birthday, something stirred inside me again. There was no denying it now. The feelings I had for her were growing stronger, and they were impossible to ignore. It wasn't just physical attraction anymore. It was something else. It was the way she always took the time to listen, the way she encouraged me when I doubted myself. She made me feel important, like I mattered, and it was terrifying. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I found myself sitting in the living room alone. The house was quiet, and I let out a long breath, trying to clear my thoughts. But as I sat there, I realized that avoiding her wasn't the solution. It was only making everything worse. So I decided to talk to her. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I knew I couldn't keep running away from what was happening between us. I just hoped I wasn't about to make a huge mistake. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I couldn't focus on anything. My interview? It felt like a distant memory. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. How Karen's robe had slipped off. How we both had been caught off guard. There was something about it. Something in the way she reacted. The way her eyes met mine when she realized what had happened. And yet there was something else too. Something I couldn't quite place. That night, I tried to avoid Karen as much as possible. It was awkward, but every time I saw her, my cheeks burned. She pretended nothing had happened, but the tension in the air was palpable. I went to bed early, hoping that a good night's sleep would clear my mind. But as I lay there in the dark, I couldn't stop replaying the moment in my head, the look on Karen's face, the way her robe had fallen. Why couldn't I stop thinking about her? The next morning, I found a note from Karen on the kitchen table. It simply read, "Jake, we need to talk." I felt my heart skip a beat. What did she want to talk about? Had she told my dad? Was she going to pretend it didn't happen? Or was there something else? I crumpled the note in my hand, trying to calm myself. Whatever was going on, I knew one thing for sure. My life was about to get a lot more complicated. I spent the morning walking around the park, trying to clear my head. I had no idea what Karen was going to say, but I knew I wouldn't be able to ignore it. When I returned home, the sun was setting, and I saw Karen through the window, setting the dinner table. It smelled like roasted chicken in the air. "Hey, Jake," Karen greeted me with a warm smile, though I could see the nervousness in her eyes. "I made your favorite. I hope you're hungry." "Thanks, Karen," I said, sitting at the table, feeling the heavy silence between us. We avoided talking about what had happened, and instead made small talk. Finally, when we finished eating, Karen set her fork down and turned to me. "Jake, about what happened yesterday," she began, her voice soft. I looked up at her, heart in my throat. "I've been thinking about it too," I admitted. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know how to say this, but I don't think it was just an accident. What happened in the bathroom made me realize that there's something more between us. I never wanted it to happen, but I can't deny it anymore." I was stunned. I had expected her to be embarrassed and tell me to forget about it. But this was something I wasn't prepared for. "What do you mean?" I whispered. She took a deep breath, her eyes locking with mine. "Jake, I felt something between us for a while. I know it's wrong, I know it's complicated, but I think you feel it too. I think we both know there's more than just family between us." I was speechless. How could she say that? I was overwhelmed with confusion, guilt, and something else. Something I couldn't deny. If you want to know what happens next, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for part 2 of this intense story. That night, all my thoughts seemed to stop. The silence of the evening, the words I never said, and the missed opportunities were overwhelming. Every passing second made my decision harder. I knew I had to talk to Karen. No matter how much I tried to fool myself, these feelings, this confusion, couldn't go on. I couldn't move forward without resolving this knot inside me. The next day, after work, I found the perfect chance to talk to Karen. It was around the time she usually made tea, and I gathered the courage to walk up to her. As she was preparing the tea, she looked up and smiled. "Hello," she said, her usual warm smile on her face. But there was something different in that smile, something that told me she was also aware of the tension between us. "Hello," I said, my voice slightly trembling. "There's something we need to talk about." Karen looked up at me, a little surprised, but nodded. "Of course. What's on your mind?" For a moment I hesitated. How should I begin? What could I even say? But I knew one thing. If I kept pretending everything was fine, I'd never be able to move past this. "Karen, about last week, what happened?" I started, my words shaky but determined. "It's been complicated for me. The feelings I have for you, I can't ignore them anymore. But I don't think it's about you or us, specifically. It's more about my own inner confusion." Karen set the tea aside and sat down at the table. She was silent for a moment, then took a deep breath before speaking. "I know," she said softly. "I've been thinking about it too. We need to be honest with each other, Jake. What happened wasn't just an accident. I mean, it was an accident, but it made me realize that maybe you feel something too." Her words hit me like a wave. I wasn't expecting this. I thought she would apologize or brush it off, but instead, she was admitting to the feelings too. "Karen, what are you saying?" I whispered, almost afraid to hear the answer. She exhaled deeply, her eyes meeting mine. "I'm saying that I've felt something for a while now. I know it's wrong, and I never wanted it to happen, but that moment made me realize maybe you feel the same way." I was stunned. My mind was racing. How could this be happening? Karen was beautiful, kind, smart. There had always been a connection between us, a chemistry I couldn't ignore. But she was my stepmother, my father's wife. This was wrong. "I don't know what to say," I finally managed. "I mean, you're my stepmother, and my dad—" "I know," she interrupted quickly, reaching out to touch my hand. "I love your father, Jake, but what I feel for you is different. It's like we understand each other in a way no one else does." Her touch sent a shock through me. I knew I should pull away, tell her this was crazy, that it could never work. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself leaning in, all the tension and desire between us pouring out in that moment. I kissed her back, my hands sliding along her arms, pulling her closer. For a moment, nothing else mattered. Not my father, not the consequences, just Karen and me, caught in something we couldn't control. But then reality hit. I pulled away, breathing hard, my mind spinning. "Karen, we can't do this," I said, my voice shaking. "What about Dad? What about us?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with both desire and regret. "I don't know, Jake. I just know I can't pretend I don't feel the same. But you're right. We need to think about what this means and what we're going to do." I nodded, my heart heavy. I didn't have the answers. All I knew was that things could never go back to how they were. We had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. The days that followed were confusing. Karen and I tried to act normal around each other, but the tension was always there, just beneath the surface. My father came back from his trip, unaware of the storm brewing in our home. I focused on finding a job, but my mind was constantly elsewhere, on Karen, on that kiss, on how her eyes had looked at me. About a week later, I found Karen sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. I joined her, and we sat together in silence, watching the sky shift from pinks to oranges. "I've been thinking a lot," she finally said, breaking the silence. "About us. About what happened." "I can't stop thinking about it either," I admitted. She turned to face me, her eyes serious. "I think we need to make a decision. Jake, we either end this now, before it goes any further, or we figure out what this is and what we want." I swallowed hard. She was right. We couldn't keep pretending that everything was normal when it clearly wasn't. But what did I want? What did she want? "What do you want, Karen?" I whispered. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and longing. "I don't know, Jake. I desire you, but I don't want to hurt your father. I don't want to ruin everything. I don't want to hurt him either," I said, my heart aching. "But I can't ignore what I feel for you. She reached out and took my hand in hers. Maybe we should take some time to sort things out, to see how we really feel. Without the pressure, without the guilt. I nodded, squeezing her hand. Yes, maybe that's a good idea. As the sun set behind us, we sat there hand in hand, knowing that no matter what happened, our lives had already changed forever. We didn't have all the answers, but for now, we had each other, and that was enough.